Well, I've gone to conventions since I was a little kid, but my favorite convention memory has to be my first professional convention in 1987. I was working as a staff artist at First Comics, and we had a big hit with the first manga translation, first English translation of manga in the United States, Lone Wolf and Cub. And I was the production artist on it, and myself and the art director of the company went to San Diego to do publicity for that. And it was, at that time, it was held in the downtown convention center. So if anybody has been to the first Rose City Comic Con or some of those stump towns that were held in the parking garage at the Doubletree, it had that kind of vibe, you know, cinder block, fluorescent lights, that kind of thing. No booths. Just only tables, barely a few banners. That was just beginning to happen. And so this guy, this art director, Alex Wald, and I checked into our hotel, which at that time was the Horton Grand, the sort of Victorian thing. But the area hadn't been gentrified. It was the dystopian urban stuff that you see in science fiction films. And there was only one restaurant nearby, and we went to it. And they had a little, they had set up a little outdoor seating, but they put up wrought iron fencing because it was crazy. So we were sitting, eating a meal, and kitty corner, it was the hotel, which was the center point for all the prostitutes and their johns. So it was like this little street parade going by while we were eating. And then later we were invited, the next night we were invited to a party. And it was Jack Kirby's 75th birthday party. And it was held in this hotel on Broadway, which was built in the 1920s and had a speakeasy that was built into it. And the speakeasy was in a basement behind the kitchen. So you had to go through the circuitous route to get there. But once you got there, it was all this beautiful tile work and some stained glass. It was stunning. And I sat and had dinner at a table next to Miguel Ferrer, who had just finished shooting RoboCop and was telling horror stories about how Paul Verhoeven was treating women on the set. I mean, this is like a straight up Me Too shit. It was just horrifying. And then after that, Seduction of the Innocent played. They were a band made up of Billy Mooney from Lost in Space and Steve Lealoa, my inker on the DC series Chronos that I did. And they played all kinds of fun rock and roll tunes. And then they played a nice, sweet little slow song. And Roz and Jack Kirby did a dance. And they unveiled a giant cake. And they cut into it. And Jackie Estrada took a bunch of photographs. And I've been spoiled ever since. Like my first convention was my best convention. It's all been downhill.
Well, first I have to say to Paul, I was at that same dinner for Kirby's 75th birthday. And in fact, I was even going to tell a little story about that, which is basically just that that was the year that a good buddy of mine, the guy that I'd known since we were in second grade together, and to a large extent was responsible for me getting into comics in the first place, because he was the first guy I met who collected comics and was sorting them out by different creators and stuff. And that made the little boy me realize that people did this for a living. So his name was Kurt Thayer. We went separate ways in our life, but we always were friends. And so after I'd been working as a business professionally for a few years, Kurt said he wanted to come down to San Diego and experience a convention with me. So, he took time off from his job and we went down there and had a great time. I was doing the convention all day and he was just wandering around San Diego seeing stuff. He really knew how to vacation. I didn't. But we went to this Kirby's birthday bash together. And afterwards, we were getting ready to leave. It was an honor to be there and see Jack being honored and stuff. But then Kurt said, you need to go up and shake his hand and thank him. And I said, I'm not going to go up and talk to Jack Kirby. He's Jack Kirby. But he kind of made me do it. And so I got up and just introduced myself and thanked him for, giving us all our fucking careers. And I got to shake Jack Kirby's hand. And I would not have done it had my friend not kicked me in the ass and made me do it. So that was a great memory and a little lesson to, let your friends push you forward sometimes, everybody. But then since you sort of really already did that story, I'll just quickly say that jumping ahead many years later, I met a very charming lady, and we had started dating, and she came up with me to Emerald City to experience a comic convention with me there. She was a civilian, knew nothing about comics really, but she was at this convention and just sort of, seeing it like the crazy circus that comics have become with, cosplayers and big display booths and all this sort of stuff going on. And there's, just little me slumped down behind my, my little desk at a comic convention. But she was trying to stay, interested or whatever. And this guy came up to me and he asked me if I would do a convention sketch of the Predator for him. And as I say, the woman who was with me didn't know. She knew what the Predator was and that it was a very complicated design. And she said to herself, good luck, he can't do that. She didn't know that I'd already drawn 2.5 Predator miniseries. So that design was already in my hand. So I just sat down there on automatic pilot. I'm banging out a head sketch of the Predator and I'm putting on the dots and the dreadlocks and everything. And her eyes are getting bigger and bigger. So she's now my wife. So I just want to say, whoever made that particular request for the Predator, thank you very much. Good things can happen at conventions. And that's my little story.
Yo, I guess I also have like a birthday story for a favorite convention memory. Actually, that whole San Diego Comic-Con, I'm trying to remember what year it was, and I'm failing miserably, but it was shortly after Emily and the Strangers Volume 2 came out, which was the first graphic novel I'd ever worked on. And I was at San Diego for 24 hours so I could go do the panel the next morning with the writer and Rob Rieger, the creator of Emily. But while I was there, I was like, well, I have 24 hours to be at Comic-Con. I haven't been in forever. I'm just going to hang out. So I went to the Hilton Bar, or the Hyatt Bar, pardon me, Hyatt Bar. The Hilton Bar hadn't even been built yet. It was a little bit too early. So I went to the Hyatt Bar and I was hanging out with Emmy Lennox. I was like, oh man, it's cool to hang out with Emmy. And while we're having drinks at the bar, one of Emmy's friends comes up to the group and goes, hey, Daughtry is throwing Jim Lee a 50th birthday party at the top of the Marriott, and they need more people to show up. We should go. So we were like, yeah, sure, of course. Like, it's friggin' Jim Lee. Of course, we're going to go to his birthday party and like say hi. Worst comes to worst, they don't let us in the door, but we get there and they let us in. And it was, I don't want to swear because I want to keep this all ages, but it was mother heckin' Jim Lee, man, like having his 50th birthday party. And for people who don't know, like Jim Lee is basically like the person who got me into comics when I was 12. Like I saw his artwork and fell in love with it. So I was so excited, but I was also so socially anxious that I didn't want to tell him that any of that at all. I didn't want to spoil his birthday party. So I just pretended I was a cute girl that showed up to his birthday party and was like, yay, comics. But we got to talking about doing a human pyramid for some reason. And next thing I know, I'm at the top of a human pyramid, one knee on top of Jim Lee's back, the other one on top of Emmy Lennox's back. It was probably that whole party. I was one of the greatest experiences of my life, and I honestly do kind of regret that I didn't tell Jim anything at all and just like played it cool, but also it was less awkward for me, I guess. But that was such a good con. My first panel, being there for a graphic novel that I had done all the art for, and like getting to hang out with friends, and I had a really great conversation poolside with Ben Dewey and like some tacos and some margaritas, but only margs for me. Ben doesn't drink. Just that, all 24 hours of that show is like the greatest convention that I've ever done, and I'll never forget a single minute of it.
I have a cajillion awesome convention stories. I love going to conventions. The one that stands out to me the most, like the one moment that was like this wow, was whenever I submitted my first pages to CB at Marvel. He went through them and pointed out some stuff, and he was like, there's this, he goes this, but all that's like little petty stuff. He goes, these actually look pretty good and stuff. And then offered me to do samples, like send me some actual scripts to work off of. And that just like blew my mind. So I was just like, what? I have to go sit down for like an hour, just focus and breathe. And then it wasn't until like a couple conventions later where I realized that actually quite a few people get to that stage and everything. But at that moment, it was like, whoa. The other moment that really stands out is like one of the first conventions I went to, and for some reason I just went to a party afterwards, and Jim Lee was there doing karaoke. And I was like, there's Jim Lee doing karaoke. That's so crazy. And just moments like that, and just watching people draw, that's like my favorite thing at conventions, just going there and seeing people just work, and it's amazing.
So I think one of my favorites actually for my own, like that isn't directly tied to me at all, is there was this little kid at a convention in Seattle. This little kid was dressed up as the Flash, and he walked up to this other cosplayer, an adult who was dressed as Tracer from Overwatch. And I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but like the kid like kind of like tugs on her sleeve and like waves hi and like whispers something to him, to her. And then he starts running back and forth like down the aisle to show how fast he can run.
Aw.
And that just reminds me, like, one of my favorite things, like, I love the creators, but I also really love how much like people get into the cosplay at shows. Like it is this like great performance festival sort of thing. It's sometimes that can get a little much, but like a lot of those folks are just doing it just because they really enjoy the characters. They really enjoy making things. And they really are wonderful with kids too. Like they always are like, it's kind of a volunteer Disneyland where people like just kind of get into character and they really like take it wholeheartedly. I mean, I guess on that same note, because I've mostly been showcasing my board games at conventions, like kids playing the game at convention is always like a delight. Like the kids and parents like playing at my table, or like the kids getting to beat the parents at the table, or like coming back like days later to pick up another copy for their friends. That's always like means a lot to me, and that's always very sweet.
I think one of my favorite experiences was one of my favorite artists, a guy named Russ Heath, was going to be a guest at a con right here in Portland. And I don't usually go and take comics to other creators to get their autograph. I'm not a big autograph guy, but I wanted to meet Russ, and I've got so many of his books, and I didn't want to bring a stack. So part of the project of going to meet him was figuring out what's the one comic I want him to sign. What's the one? And I found this one issue of Our Army at War, Sergeant Rock, that he drew. It looked like nothing else he had done. He had changed his style for this one issue. Used a lot more solid black than he usually did, and kind of a rougher, spikier pen work. He's usually super controlled, and this was like almost anticipating Bill Sienkiewicz 15 years later. And he did for just that one issue, and then never did it again. So I brought the book to him, and I showed it to him. I said, "This is one of my favorite comics, and I love this style. How come you never did it again?" And he looked at the comic, and he turned a page and turned another page and looked at every single page of the comic. And he looked up at me and said, "I broke my hand, and DC wouldn't give me the time off, so I had to ink the entire issue with my arm in a cast. And that's why he had to do all the rough, scribbly stuff in there." And I was like, wow, okay. There's I got a lesson, and I got a story, and that was exactly the experience I wanted from meeting one of my heroes. It was very cool.
My favorite convention memory is kind of like the convention overall. It was Awesome Con in 2014, and it was my first convention I went to once Shudder was out and my career kind of blew up a little bit from doing Shudder, and like I felt treated so well. Like they put me up in a boutique hotel that was just gorgeous. Oh, and this is in Washington, D.C., which I had never been. And so going to like the birthplace of all this history was so cool. So like they flew us, me and Joe Keating, in a day before the convention started so that we could go see the sites a little bit. And so the experience of going to all of the memorials for the first time and like seeing all this history was just really sentimental to me. Like I didn't think it would emotionally affect me as much as it did. So that was really cool. And then the convention itself was a blast, because people actually knew who I was all of a sudden, and I got to sell my comics, and people asked for sketches, and I sold like 5 pages of original art for more than $100 each, which was unheard of for me. And I got to buy one of my favorite books of all time, which is my like artist edition of Mark Schultz's Xenozoic Tales. Yeah, like the bars were way cooler than what I was used to because I was living in Montana at the time. So yeah, it was just like really great company. Oh yeah, I also met Sarah Vaughn at that convention, and then years later we ended up doing our series Sleepless together. So it was just kind of this really cool, magical weekend of good feelings.
This is sort of encompasses 2 different years of San Diego. You know, I had been going to San Diego Comic-Con ever since I was in college and a fledgling wannabe creator, just trying to scrounge up portfolio reviews unsuccessfully to get work. And you know, years later, I have an established career. I don't go to San Diego anymore because San Diego, you know, continued to get crazier, and it never really brought me any work. Anyway, so I stopped going. But then somehow, BioWare, who makes the Mass Effect games, one of my favorite game series, they got wind of my work. Well, I guess it was really through Dark Horse, where I've done a lot of work for Dark Horse. People at Dark Horse knew I was a Mass Effect fan, and they're doing a bunch of coloring books, one of which was the Mass Effect coloring book, and they had me do like 9 out of the 45 or so pages. And I did like a big shot of like all the characters all stacked up and stuff. And BioWare and Dark Horse have like a partnership where they share a booth at San Diego Comic-Con. And BioWare didn't really have any new games that, you know, they needed to display or anything, but they still wanted to have a booth to promote themselves. So they were like, that coloring book thing that we did with you with Dark Horse, let's do that, but big. And so they hired me to come down because they knew me from that big shot in the coloring book to reproduce a big group shot on like a 60 by 60 canvas live on the show floor across 4 days, but featuring the characters from the newer game as opposed to the classic games. And so it was just a treat to be like flown down and put up by Dark Horse, my main comics employer, and BioWare, who create my favorite game series, to draw characters from my favorite game series on the show floor live. And that was just like a huge blast. We did it 1 year, skipped the next year, and then the year after that, they brought me and Kat, as well as Ben Dewey was there too, and who else was with us? Dustin Glenn and Philip Seavey?
Seavey?
I think it's Seavey.
It's probably Seavey.
Philip Seavey.
Sorry, Philip.
And we all, you know, teamed up and did a bunch of series of drawings of all across like EA video game properties. And it's just, you know, a joy to sort of draw live, which is not a thing I usually do. Obviously, most of us are just behind our desks and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's weirdly fun to do it on somebody's dime on the show floor.
So when I was still in high school, I made a bunch of internet friends, and we all were going to go out to San Diego Comic-Con together. And like, that was the first time we were actually meeting each other. And we were just like these teenagers, and Bill Mudrin. And we met up. It was so incredible to meet these people because this was back when, like, I guess people were meeting from the internet, but it was still kind of like this, scary thing. Like not as acceptable as it is now, especially for teenage girls. And we had made this mini comic together that we just made to just give to our favorite cartoonists. No table, no money. It's like, hey, I love your stuff so much. I just want you to know that I exist. Here's the thing that I worked on. And so we were going around, this gaggle of teenage girls, and giving out this mini comic to all our favorite artists. And after a couple days, or maybe just even one day or so, it got to the point where we'd come up to somebody and be like, "Oh, hey, we," and they'd be like, "Are you the girls with the mini comic?" And we're like, "We are." Like, "Can I have one?" And be like, "Oh my God, what?" And so like people started to know to look out for us. Yeah, it was an incredible, like, validating feeling to have our heroes, because to us, these are movie stars. These are people who are professionally published, and like that's a whole other realm, and God only knows how you make it there. You have to that's not normal people don't do that. And to have them acknowledge us and talk to us and treat us like we mattered too, and they were interested in us, and like in a really genuine, hello youngsters, young ladies, you like comics? Okay, let's like they made themselves available to talk to us about comics. And I don't know if it was that year or the next year. No, I think it was that year that I met Steve Lieber, and however many years later, work in a studio with him now. And then and like now I'm in that position. And now when I go around conventions, like if people give me their mini comics now, they come up and they're just like, "I just want to give this to you because I like your work." And there's some of them I'll be like, hey, you let's stay in contact. Like, hey kid, I like what you're doing. So yeah, it's just kind of like a full circle thing.
I could say what it was like on the other side of the table from meeting Erica and her friends.
Oh no.
No.
Go do it.
These are my exact. This is my exact thought. These are the quick mammals that are going to steal all of our dinosaur eggs. And I remember that because I still have one of the minis that Erica was giving out. This was actually at the second convention I met you at. This is like from 2003 right here.
Oh my God.
It just, within easy reach, there's your How to Fold Stars.
Like, you can't see, but I honestly, my arms are covered in goosebumps and I'm a little bit teary. Like, don't tell anyone. But
it was amazing. I mean, that first mini comic that you handed me that time, that was you, that was Vera Brosgol, Dylan McConis, Cleo Chang, Jen Wang, Bill Mundren. Mm-hmm. That was a murderer's row of talent, all in like 12 pages of Xeroxes. Holy cow!
Yeah, and like we're all like, we were just high schoolers except for Bill, and and like now, over a decade later, like a dozen plus years later, we're all professionals and we're all still in this field. It's really remarkable.